The Mexican-American War, when half of Mexico became the American Southwest. The war that redrew borders and reshaped a continent in the mid-19th century. A war broke out between two neighboring republics, Mexico and the United States, that would profoundly alter the map of North America. The Mexican-American War was not simply a clash over disputed land. It was a collision between two visions of the future: Mexico's dream of post-colonial sovereignty, and the United States' pursuit of manifest destiny, the belief that it was destined to rule the continent from the Atlantic to the Pacific. But political instability, weak infrastructure, and regional divisions made governing this vast region difficult. The Texas Revolution led to the formation of the short-lived Republic of Texas, which Mexico never officially recognized. Though the war lasted just 2 years, its consequences still echo today in territory, identity, migration, and memory. The issue of Texas' southern border, the Rio Grande versus the Nueces River, further escalated tensions. President James K. Polk, an ardent expansionist, declared that American blood has been shed on American soil, and persuaded Congress to declare war. In New Mexico, a region seen as vital for America's economic future, maritime access, and geopolitical strength, these disputes laid the groundwork for war. The backdrop: from independence to dispute. After winning independence from Spain in 1880, Mexico inherited an enormous and sparsely populated territory that stretched from Texas to California. In the 1830s, American settlers in the Mexican territory of Texas, most of whom ignored Mexican laws and customs, demanded autonomy. Along the way, U.S. forces defeated Mexican troops at Cerro Gordo, Churubusco, and finally at Chapultepec Castle. When the U.S. annexed Texas in 1845, Mexico viewed it as a provocation. Outbreak of war, provocation, and politics. In April 1846, U.S. troops under General Zachary Taylor clashed with Mexican forces near the Rio Grande. The most famous example of patriotic resistance came during the Battle of Chapultepec, where 6 military cadets died defending the castle. Their sacrifice became a symbol of Mexican heroism and martyrdom. Polk's real objective was not just Texas, but the vast territories of California. The war unfolds. From northern Mexico to Mexico City, the war featured multiple military campaigns. In the north, Taylor's forces won major battles at Monterrey and Buena Vista, even as Mexican forces put up stiff resistance. In the west, U.S. forces led by Stephen Kearny and naval expeditions captured California and New Mexico with relatively little resistance, aided by pro-American settlers. The most dramatic campaign came in 1847, when General Winfield Scott launched an amphibious assault at Veracruz, then marched inland to capture Mexico City. The fall of Mexico City marked the end of major hostilities. The enormous territorial loss was a national humiliation, and the government faced domestic criticism for the defeat. Political instability would persist for decades, culminating in civil wars and the French intervention in the 1860s. The newly acquired lands were rich in resources and opened the way for westward migration. The California Gold Rush and the rise of new states. Mexican resistance and heroism despite internal divisions. Many Mexicans viewed the war as a defense of national dignity. Mexico's fragmented leadership, plagued by infighting and political instabilities, struggled to mount a unified response, but the courage of local militias and civilians was widely recognized. Though the treaty promised them rights and protections, many Mexican Americans faced dispossession, legal discrimination, and cultural marginalization. In the U.S., it is often overshadowed by the Civil War, but its implications were no less transformative. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo on February 2, 1848. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed. Its terms were historic. Mexico ceded 55% of its territory to the United States, roughly 2.2 million square kilometers. For Mexico, it was a painful loss that helped define national consciousness. For the U.S., it was a victory that brought immense wealth and growth, but also sowed the seeds of future conflict. This included present-day California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Utah, and parts of Colorado and Wyoming. The U.S. paid Mexico $15 million and agreed to assume $3.25 million in debts owed to American citizens. While the treaty ended the war, it left deep wounds in Mexico's national psyche. The aftermath for Mexico. Trauma and transformation. Mexico emerged from the war bitterly weakened, both territorially and politically. But the war also sparked intellectual and political reflection, eventually leading to reforms and resistance movements. It remains a defining moment in Mexico's modern history. The aftermath for the U.S. Expansion and division for the United States. The war was a military triumph and a fulfillment of manifest destiny. However, this expansion intensified the debate over slavery in new territories, fueling sectional tensions that would lead to the Civil War just over a decade later. Long-term legacy. Borders, identity, and memory. The war created the modern U.S.-Mexico border, turning former Mexican citizens into ethnic minorities overnight. In Mexico, the war is remembered as a symbol of external aggression and internal fragility. The war that still shapes a continent. The Mexican-American War was not just a war for land, it was a war over ideology, identity, and destiny. It changed both nations in profound ways, Nearly 2 centuries later, the consequences of that war are still seen in the cultural, political, and demographic realities of North America today.